What would happen if Draco Malfoy was sorted into Gryffindor? How would his life change if he was friends with Ron, Harry, and Hermione? And what if after joining Dumbledore's army, Draco ran away from home? Follow along on this magical Harry Potter What If as the story of Draco as a Gryffindor continues. Draco's return home after the school year was filled with mixed emotions. His father had been arrested and sent to Azkaban, and though he knew that it was his father's own doing for being associated with Voldemort, but Draco couldn't help but feel like it was partially his fault. Would the events of the Department of Mysteries have happened the same way had he stuck closer to his parents? Or if he had talked Harry out of going to the Ministry for the obviously fake vision? Would his father still be free? Would Harry's godfather still be alive? And would the Ministry know that Voldemort had returned? All hypotheticals that ran through Draco's head. He feared the worst now that he was home. Though his mom did not care for this ongoing war, she only cared for his safety. That didn't change the fact that Voldemort was furious at the Malfoy family for Lucius's failure that led to 11 of his followers to be taken away to Azkaban. He wrote several times to his 3 friends about his concerns for him and his mother. The 2 of them couldn't possibly be safe with Voldemort's anger aimed towards his father. He knew he was in trouble as things got closer to the school year. It was less than 2 weeks before he would be headed back to Hogwarts, and he could attempt to forget about everything that had happened when he had overheard a conversation in the study. His mother had said that she was waiting for company to come by and wanted him to stay clear of the room for the time being. Draco had intended to follow his mother's instructions. However, he had a terrible gut feeling that something was wrong. He made sure his steps were quiet as he moved outside the back entrance to the study. There, he was able to hear everything, and it took no time for him to learn how much danger he was truly in. As a punishment for his father's failure, Voldemort wanted Draco to become a Death Eater and replace him. He wanted to give Draco a task to test his allegiance. Draco was to murder Albus Dumbledore. Draco knew that if he stuck around, not only would he be given the Dark Mark, making him traceable to Voldemort, he would be expected to murder the headmaster of Hogwarts. He didn't want to kill anyone, more so that it was someone that his best friend trusted so much. And if he got the Dark Mark and failed, it wouldn't matter if the failure was intentional or not. Voldemort would kill him for no other reason than to prove a point to his father. So Draco made an impulse decision then and there. He went up to his room, while his mother was still busy, and began packing his things. He fit whatever he could into his trunk. All of his school supplies that he and his mother had picked up a few days prior, as much of his closet as he could fit, and anything else he thought that he would need. He didn't know where he could go, but he had to get away before he was branded a Death Eater. Draco waited until it was the middle of the night. He knew his mother was fast asleep, and he knew that Voldemort would not be back until the next day to put his plan into motion. This was his only chance. He dragged his trunk to the fireplace with the only idea of where he could go for the time being. He recalled a few years prior when Harry needed a place. He was able to stay at the Leaky Cauldron. Draco had first thought of the Weasleys, but he couldn't imagine dropping into their home unannounced. Draco spent the 9 days before the school term in a small room above the old pub. He was able to get to Gringotts the next morning, right when they opened and before his mother had noticed him missing, getting enough money to last him through the end of the term. Once in the room, he didn't leave much other than to get food from the pub downstairs, and once he got his food, he went back up to his room. Running away would mean nothing if he was caught. He just needed to make it to Hogwarts, and he knew he would be safe for the school year. Upon getting himself to King's Cross Station, he wasted no time boarding the train and finding a compartment for him and his friends. He didn't watch out the window for them, afraid that his mother would have come to the station looking for him. He would write her a letter once he was at the school, but for now, it would be safest for him to distance himself from her. When Ron, Harry, and Hermione joined him in the train compartment, the 4 compared summers. Ron and Hermione had rather standard holidays. They spent a good portion of the train ride talking about how Dumbledore had Harry help recruit Professor Slughorn back to Hogwarts. Draco confided in the 3 about how Voldemort wanted him to kill Dumbledore. He hoped that without him, Voldemort wouldn't have the means to attempt to murder the headmaster while school was in session, but Draco wasn't the only son of a Death Eater that went to Hogwarts. "So you ran away from home?" Ron questioned, looking worried. "I had to," Draco nodded. "I'd be dead by the end of the year if I had the dark mark." "Where were you staying?" Hermione asked next. "The Leaky Cauldron," Draco shrugged. "I doubt I can go back there, though. I'm sure Voldemort is going to be looking for me." "Well, don't worry." Harry gave him a pat on the shoulder. "We've got all term to figure out what to do next. We'll make sure that you're safe." Draco felt a sense of relief. It was still a shock to hear someone put him first. They were more worried about his safety than the horrible task that Voldemort was trying to dispense out to a student. Hermione convinced Draco to write to his mother while he had the time on the train. And Draco knew that she was right. The last thing he wanted was to leave his mother alone in that house. But he did what he had to do, and he hoped she would understand that. With the letter written, Harry allowed Hedwig to take the letter as he wasn't able to bring his owl with him, and the three continued on their way to school. Draco went through the sorting ceremony hardly paying attention to anything that Dumbledore was talking about. He didn't hear where any of the new students were placed, or how Dumbledore introduced a new potions professor and that Snape would be taking the position of defense against the dark arts. Ron and Harry tried to assure him that everything would be fine when they made it back to their dorm room, telling him there was no way that Voldemort would come after him while he was at Hogwarts. And while he felt that was mostly true, Draco still had a gut feeling that something bad was going to happen. Draco walked down the staircase alone as he started down for breakfast. He had woken up late and told Ron and Harry to head down without him. He might have slept through his first class had the two not woken him up. "Mr. Malfoy?" He was stopped before he could enter the Great Hall. "Sir!" He stepped to the side, knowing exactly what Snape was wanting to talk to him about. Snape moved back, the two stepping far enough away from the entrance to the Great Hall so no one would hear the conversation. "Your mother is greatly worried. She asked me to inform her if you arrived at school and to keep an eye out for you this term." "I wrote her last night, Professor. I'm sorry she wasted your time." Draco tried to step back toward the Great Hall, only for Snape to keep talking. "Malfoy, I know about what Dark Lord was going to task you to do." He kept his voice low. "You left so you wouldn't be marked, didn't you?" Draco swallowed hard, looking around to make sure no one was listening. "You don't have to explain anything. Just make sure that your mother knows you're safe. And the Dark Lord now considers you to be as cowardly as your father. I don't believe he will be coming after you." "Thank you, sir." Draco felt a bit of relief, though he wasn't sure he truly believed that. His father failed, and then he ran away. Voldemort couldn't be too happy with the Malfoy name right now. Draco put his main focus into helping Harry with his own special task from Dumbledore, in the hopes it would help him forget about his own messed-up life. Something that could possibly help stop Voldemort instead of helping him. Harry had been seeing Dumbledore for private lessons, where he was learning more and more about Voldemort's past and what they could do to bring him down. Although Harry wasn't sure what exactly he was looking for yet, Dumbledore had asked him to get close to Professor Slughorn, and that there was a specific reason that Dumbledore had brought him back to Hogwarts. It helped that Harry had gotten a textbook with all of the answers in it. Slughorn thought he was the best student he had in years, and even invited Harry and Hermione to join his special club, though he avoided them so as to not leave Draco and Ron alone. The four went to the Three Broomsticks on their trip to Hogsmeade, where they ran into Slughorn. After a mention of a Christmas party, it was clear that the professor had too many drinks at the bar. While Harry finally agreed to a Slug Club party, Draco saw something that quickly had him concerned. Crabbe and Goyle were sneaking up the stairs of the Three Broomsticks. It was rare for anyone to go up there, and it looked as if they did not want to be seen. It was on their way back to the school when two students ahead of them suddenly stopped. Katie Bell, a fellow Gryffindor, collapsed before suddenly moving into the air. Not in a calm way, as if she was being levitated, but her arms were stretched out on either side of her. Her head tilted back and her hair was whipping around her face. Katie began to scream, echoing, as the four of them and Katie's friend Leanne rushed forward to help Katie down, but she came crashing to the ground on her own. Draco and Ron were able to catch her, but she was thrashing around too much to keep a hold of her. The screams and thrashing continued. She had to be cursed. On the ground beside her was an odd-looking necklace, old and dusty, and he had seen it before. With the help of Hagrid, he was able to carry the girl back to the school without her writhing and thrashing being a problem. "Leanne, what happened?" Harry questioned, helping the girl from the ground. "It was the package. She opened it, and then this happened." Ron grew closer to the necklace, reaching out his hand. "Don't touch it," Draco snapped. "That's what cursed her." "Leanne, how did she get it?" Hermione questioned. "That's why we were arguing. She came back from the bathroom with it. She said she had to deliver it to someone, but she wouldn't say who." The girl shook her head. "We need to get back to the school and see if she's okay." Hermione continued, motioning back towards the castle. Draco took his scarf, carefully using it to wrap around the necklace, ensuring that he wouldn't accidentally touch it on their way back to the school. Rather than the hospital wing, the five ended up in Professor McGonagall's office, explaining the events of what had just happened. Draco had a theory, but he knew it would be too soon to voice it to a teacher, especially since he knew more than he should for someone that ran away from home. Instead, he questioned if Katie would be okay. McGonagall assured them that between Madame Pomfrey and Professor Snape studying the necklace, that she would be quite all right. Later that night, when they were alone in the common room, he explained that he saw Crabbe and Goyle at the Three Broomsticks. It made sense to him that Voldemort would just give the task to another child of a Death Eater, one that also needed to prove himself. Katie had to be delivering that necklace to Dumbledore. It was too bad that the four had no way to prove that it was them. Harry had to reform the Quidditch team because of Katie being in the hospital, and his choice to make Dean Thomas a chaser made out to be a great choice. His last problem was Ron, who was lacking confidence in his ability to play. After a trick of using Felix Felicis, slipping it into Ron's morning drink, the Gryffindor team had an amazing game. During the after-party in the common room, Lavender Brown took it upon herself to start a relationship with Ron, snogging him for half the night for winning the match. Hermione had left the party in a huff when she saw the spectacle, jealousy running through her. And he knew that Harry was jealous of Dean for being with Ginny. And Draco couldn't help feeling a bit jealous himself. It wasn't until he saw his best friends falling for each other that he realized he cared for Hermione as well. But these feelings were confusing for him. Did he like Hermione like that? Or did he like the fact that she showed him unwavering kindness? It didn't matter that he came from a family of Death Eaters, or that he had been raised to hate Muggle-borns. Hermione had been kind to him the moment that Ron and Harry had decided that he was going to be their friend. He couldn't admit this until he figured out his own feelings, but he could be there for Hermione when she was feeling down. And as Ron and Lavender's relationship continued, it happened more and more often. It got to the point where Hermione was avoiding Ron. Even after the Christmas party that Slughorn threw, where Hermione took Draco in an effort to make Ron jealous, and after the Christmas holiday that Draco and Harry spent at the Burrow, while Hermione went home to her parents. The two still avoided each other. It was well into the second term when Draco and Harry woke to Ron acting strangely. He was obsessing over a girl, talking about how much he loved her. It was odd, as Ron had been saying the night before how annoyed he was getting with Lavender. Though it turned out that he had eaten some chocolates that were meant for Harry from Romilda Vane, spiked with a love potion. Harry insisted on taking him to Professor Slughorn instead of the hospital wing, insisting that it was his ticket into getting Slughorn to open up. But it was less than an hour that Draco, Hermione, and Ginny were called down to the hospital wing. Slughorn had been able to lift the love potion, only for Ron to drink poisoned mead that was intended for Professor Dumbledore. Hermione finally put her anger behind her, more worried about her best friend's safety. Everything felt back to normal when Lavender saw Ron and Hermione leaving the common room together, assuming the two were alone, and not that Draco and Harry were only a few steps behind them. Finally, after trying to retrieve the memory from Slughorn for several months, Harry was successful. He had used the Felix Felicis potion to get a hold of the memory, and after taking it straight to Dumbledore, he was able to report back to his friends the next day with what he had learned. Horcruxes, a dark piece of magic that allows someone to hide a piece of their soul in an object and protects it from harm. With this recovered memory, Dumbledore was able to confirm that Voldemort hadn't just made one Horcrux, he had made 6, including the diary that Harry had destroyed in his second year, and a ring that Dumbledore had destroyed. The key to destroying Voldemort would be destroying all of the Horcruxes. But where would one even start to look for them? Surely Voldemort had them all hidden away. On June 30th, when the group thought they had successfully made it through the year without another attempt on Dumbledore's life, Harry had announced that the headmaster wanted to take him off school grounds in search of a Horcrux. Harry had asked his friend to keep an eye on the school in case Crabbe and Goyle were going to be up to something while they were gone. So Draco was still awake with Ron, Hermione, Neville, Ginny, and Luna. Draco found himself guarding the room of requirement with Ron and Ginny, while Hermione, Neville, and Luna were watching Snape's office. Harry had been convinced that Snape was helping Voldemort, though Draco thought that he was still playing both sides. His father had told him that he had turned spy for Dumbledore at the end of the First War. The hall suddenly filled with a dark powder, making it impossible to see anything around them. They had recognized the powder from the Weasley joke shop, Peruvian darkness powder. Something was happening, but they couldn't see what. As the smoke and powder disappeared, it looked as if nothing had changed, but the door to the room of requirement had appeared, and the door was still open. It was only a few moments later Neville came rushing up the stairs. Snape had emerged from his office and ordered him and the girls to get all of the Order members to the Astronomy Tower. It was lucky that in addition to Harry having his friends keep an eye on things, that Dumbledore had posted several Order of the Phoenix members around the school as well. Draco felt a tightness in his chest as they approached the steps of the Astronomy Tower. He was coming to realize that this would be his first interaction with any of the Death Eaters since his father's arrest. Despite his fear growing with each step, he couldn't stop moving. The last thing he wanted was to go up against people that he was actively avoiding. But how could he leave his friends when they needed him most? Bill Weasley, Tonks, Remus Lupin had also made their way to the Astronomy Tower, and Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick were already at the top of the steps when the students had arrived. He found himself face to face with the people who had always been around his home, the people that his father had always trusted. But Draco had always feared them. Dumbledore and Harry were nowhere to be seen, and when Snape got himself into the Astronomy Tower, he immediately pushed past everyone and moved up to the second level. No one else could follow behind him from a curse that blocked out anyone that didn't have the dark mark. It was only to be assumed that Harry and Dumbledore were trapped up there as well. A Death Eater had been killed, though it was a friendly fire. A killing curse that had managed to miss Remus Lupin and hit Gibbon instead. Draco could feel the tightness in his chest growing. It was almost getting hard to breathe. While everyone was quickly dueling with a Death Eater, Draco found himself staring down Fenrir Greyback. "You're a long way from home, Malfoy." The man laughed. Draco started on the defense. He thought he was prepared for this battle. But now he found himself frozen. He was barely blocking the spells in time before they hit him, and Fenrir was getting closer. Close enough to where Greyback didn't need his wand. As the man raised his arm, his nails that he had sharpened himself to do maximum damage. And since he was a werewolf, he could leave someone permanently scarred with his nails. Malfoy was suddenly pushed out of the way, falling to the ground. Bill Weasley now stood where he had been before, and he took the attack that was meant for him. Greyback dragged his claw like nails down the left side of Bill's face. The Weasley staggered back and collapsed to the ground, blood spilling from his face. "Bill?" Draco's eyes went wide. "You must have done something special to get the Weasley trash to care about you." Greyback laughed. Draco got back to his feet and without hesitation began throwing curses at the man. He was so focused on taking Greyback down that he almost didn't notice that Snape had come down from the level above them, dragging Crabbe behind him, quickly followed by Harry, who was chasing after the two. The Death Eaters had their orders to flee the school. However, most were still stuck in battle with an Order member. Draco had started strong against Greyback, was losing his footing. But as Harry passed by, he immobilized the man and continued on his way. Draco stood shocked for a moment before turning his attention back to Bill. Weasley? He was unconscious. One by one, the Death Eaters were rushing to leave the school grounds, and Harry was chasing after them. Draco used his own school jacket to try to stop the blood, but he knew that werewolf injuries would stop on their own. Professor? Draco looked for McGonagall, or anyone that was close enough to help. Remus Lupin quickly came to his side, carefully pulling back fabric to see the damage. We need to get him down to the hospital wing. Draco stood in the corner of the hospital wing, trying to stay out of everyone's way. For the most part, everyone had made it through the battle unharmed. Neville was a little disoriented, and Tonks had a small cut on her shoulder that had already stopped bleeding on its own. Bill Weasley was the only person that had been seriously injured. Madame Pomfrey had assured everyone that he would be all right, though his scars would never go away. She had given him something to sleep so that he would not have to sit through the process of her sealing his wounds. And Professor McGonagall had sent word back to the family home so that Arthur and Molly would know what had happened. Draco hadn't moved since they had all gotten into the hospital wing. He wasn't hurt physically, so he wanted to stay out of the way. But he couldn't look away from Bill Weasley's face. The scars were being covered with dressings, but Draco still could see it. The amount of blood that was spilling from the wounds while they were in that tower. He had to fight back tears, fight back the feeling that it was his fault. The Weasleys were kind enough to accept Draco after all the reasons that they had not to trust him. And now, because of him, Bill was hurt. Draco. Hermione stepped beside him. Are you okay? He's going to be okay, right? He couldn't look away from the hospital bed. Bill's going to be fine. Honestly, the scars will suit him with him being a curse breaker and all. She let out a small laugh. Mr. and Mrs. Weasley suddenly came rushing through the door, quickly followed by Fleur Delacour, Bill's fiancée. Ron and Ginny, who had been standing immediately beside their brother, took a step back to allow their parents through. You know it's not your fault, right? Hermione continued. Bill will say the same thing when he wakes up. But he pushed me out of the way. Greyback was about to attack me, and Weasley pushed me out of the way. Draco took a deep breath. That doesn't make it your fault. Bill would have done that for any of us, and that just means how much he trusts you. Harry finally joined the group in the hospital wing and explained what had happened. Crabbe was the one to kill Albus Dumbledore, and Snape stood there and did nothing, allowing it to happen. Dumbledore had asked for Snape to help, and he did nothing. It was after the funeral that Harry explained to Draco, Ron, and Hermione that he needed to go looking for the rest of the Horcruxes, and that the one that they had gotten from the cave was a fake. He would be skipping his final year at Hogwarts to go on the hunt. And we're going with you. Draco, Ron, and Hermione were all on board to help with the search. Though Harry tried to stop them, they were adamant that they wouldn't let him do this alone. Now Draco just had to figure out where he was going to go until the search began.